HanselMinutes.com. It's Hansel Minutes, a weekly discussion with web developer and technologist Scott Hanselman. This is Lawrence Ryan announcing show number 211, recorded live Thursday, April 15th, 2010. Support for Hansel Minutes is provided by Telerik R80 Controls, the most comprehensive suite of components for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications. Online at www.telerik.com. In this episode, Scott talks with Jeff Atwood on the future of Stack Overflow.
Hi, this is Scott Hanselman, and this is another episode of Hansel Minutes. And on this episode, we've got Jeff Atwood. Jeff Atwood from Coding Horror and from Stack Overflow. How's it going?
Going good.
So we haven't been able to get our fix of the Stack Overflow podcast lately, so I figured we got to have you on this show. What's going on with the show?
Yeah, the show's a little bit in limbo. I think Joel felt like two things went on. So Joel Spolsky, my business partner, decided that he was sort of done with blogging after. He doesn't even like to call it a blog because he's so old school. But he's been doing it 10 years now, and I think he felt like he had plateaued. He had done everything he wanted to do in that format. And I think the podcast was a little bit of collateral damage. And also in that we felt like it was getting a little tiny bit repetitive in that, so we thought we'd refocus and try to figure out what the next thing is for the podcast. And we still haven't really figured that out yet. So we're working on it. But it might come back. It's not dead, but it's
just
come
pause.
Back, like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. We're going to turn it into something else. We're not sure what that something else is yet, but we'll see.
Sounds like Joel might be tired of being famous.
I think he is definitely a little tired of being famous, and particularly being famous within our little niche of, technology. I think he is ready to do something else.
Mm-hmm. Hey, how long have you been blogging? He's been blogging for 10 plus years. How long? When did you start?
I think he started in, I think, like 1999 or 2000. And then I started in 2004, about mid-2004, actually. So it's actually, we're not that far apart. But I was describing it to someone else, and I realized that these waves weren't that far apart. If you look at people that were, old school, OG original bloggers, some of them started in the 90s, which is amazing. But a lot of them started around the year 2000. So it was only really a 4-year head start for the real leaders. That actually doesn't seem like that much time in the big scheme of things. But it's certainly much harder to start now with a blog than it used to be because there's so many more of them. It's just crazy how time works, I guess.
You used to do a blog a day. You had legendary tempo. It was just like every weekday without fail there was a blog post. And you'd always talked about is it more fun to talk about writing software than writing software? And then you blog less and less. I assume because you're writing software now.
It's not so much. So really the work I'm doing with Stack Overflow is very complementary to what I write about on Coding Horror, because when I sort of went full time with my blog, one of the things I said, and I still believe this, is you can't really just be a blogger. That's kind of boring. You're not really doing anything. You're just like a pundit. So I wanted to create something, and that something ended up being, of course, Stack Overflow and the family of sites around Stack Overflow. And I love working on that. I mean, it's fascinating. I enjoy it tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
But it does affect your writing, and not so much the fact that I'm writing software, is that we're running a business. That takes a lot of effort. Just running a business is very fatiguing. There's just a lot of things that have to go on that aren't necessarily software that you just have to get done. And definitely, if I had to characterize what takes the most time, it's just running a small business takes a lot of time.
Can't you hire another small business to do that? Is it the administrivia of it, or what is it that takes the time?
It's hard to characterize everything that takes all the time. I think it's just really. Well, we did hire a community moderator, so we have a person whose full-time job it is to be a sociologist / school principal, and look at the community and figure out where it's going and things like that. But right now he's focused on the Stack Exchange side because of all the big changes there. So that's a help. But I think also just figuring out strategy, what it is you're doing, where you're going. There's just a lot of things going on, particularly right now, because we're taking venture capital And there's a lot of things that are going to change about the company, some of which are now public, so it's good because I can finally talk about them. That was really frustrating, not being able to talk about it. And even, technically the venture capital deal hasn't closed. We believe it will soon. I can't say who it is and all that stuff, but so hopefully everything, within a month or two, everything will be public and sort of back to normal. I think it's also a very hectic time at the moment.
Well, that's cool. Well, congratulations on the venture capital thing. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, we think so. I mean, Joel, it's funny for Joel because Joel had come out very anti-venture capital, and I was not a fan of it either. But what we found was that if you want to really grow, like, I liken this to SimCity. So you're playing SimCity, and if you've ever played SimCity, there's a point at which you're growing your city that you need a whole bunch of money to just build, like, just stuff. You need stuff to make your city grow. And it's this weird catch-22 of, without this infrastructure stuff, I can't bring more people in, you know? And if I don't have the money, I can't get the people. So, like, you do this thing, you float a bond. And that's, like, key. In every game you'll ever play of SimCity, there's some point at which you buy this massive bond, which is like a big chunk of money that you use to build your city. And then you're just assuming that at the end of this period, when the bond comes up, you'll have the money because you'll grow to a certain size. So really, it's exactly like that. So we're really just floating a bond of trying to grow, where we feel like our constraining resource is just not having enough people to do things. And, you know, people cost money, and that's fine. I'm very happy to spend money on hiring great people. I love nothing more than that, rather than say hardware or whatever, which is replaceable. But we're going to float this bond and then, you know, grow the sites, and then hopefully at the end of that we'll have something large enough that, you know, the venture capitalists will at least make their money back, or ideally make more money back.
How big do you want to be? Do you want to be like a top 10 internet site? Like a Wikipedia type thing?
I think Wikipedia is a little too big for what we want to do. I would like to be quite large, because I think there's certain benefits you only get at scale. And when I say quite large, I don't mean like all of programming, because that's maybe not a big enough topic. But I would like to cover a bunch of related topics. And that's sort of what Stack Exchange 2.0 is about, which is on blog.stackexchange.com. It's not the top post anymore, but it's right under it, where we talked about, we want to kind of be like Usenet 2.0 a little bit. And the way I view this is we're not a nonprofit. I can't say that we're a nonprofit, because we're not. We are a for-profit company. But I would like us to really behave as much as possible like a nonprofit. In other words, we're trying to build things that are of general utility to the internet. And actually provide a better forum, for people to get information than what's already out there. Not just on programming, but a bunch of other related topics. And to do that, I think, in a credible way, I think you have to get fairly large. You have to be, I don't want to say Facebook size or Twitter size, but very, very sizable. And, you know, the hope is with the venture capital that we'll have enough people to actually cover a lot of these other topics and make a credible go at, like, covering these topics. And on blog.stackexchange.com, if you read through there, there's like this plan where really when I brought up SimCity, it was for a reason. This is really like this is like urban planning. We're trying to build an environment where people can come and participate, and actually, you know, govern this area as well. You know, we're going to elect moderators. There's going to be site founders. You'll of course get a beta badge for participating in the beta. And just the concept that you're building a community that's self-governing in a way that Usenet kind of wasn't, and in a way that Wikipedia maybe kind of is as well. And the thing I want to avoid is sort of the Craigslist phenomenon, where Craigslist is this huge, huge deal. I mean, Craigslist is enormous. And who really runs Craigslist? You know, it's not you, it's not me, it's this cabal of people at Craigslist, you know, and there's no visibility.
Craig, right?
Yeah, it's Craig, but who knows? I mean, Craig's not very public about why they do things, how they do things. And we're trying to build, and they're a for-profit company. They're not a nonprofit, right? And I think we're trying to do a little bit more ethically than what Craigslist is doing, where the community actually has, say, there's a mini political process of them running the city that's actually documented. And
okay. So, I mean, on Craigslist, certainly the community owns the content, but you're saying they don't own the direction of the site, they don't own the functionality of the site, and you want to have the community own both the content and the direction.
That's right. That's right, definitely. I mean, there'll be certain city planners that you work with to figure out, like, what you want for your community. And, you know, there's things. It's still a Q&A type format. I mean, it has to fit within our format, but I think there's going to be a lot of flexibility. I think Q&A is such a large set of functionality that I think you can cover a lot of communities. But I really want it to be, of the community, by the community, for the community. And our top line goal, the thing that Joel and I agree on just intimately, is that we want to make the internet better. We're not going to do anything that's going to damage the fabric of the internet. The whole purpose of this exercise is to get better information on the internet faster, so that people can follow your trail of breadcrumbs and actually, the next future traveler to happen upon your question will get an answer immediately because it's already there. And, the principle of just being able to share your knowledge, show off what you know, which programmers love. I mean, programmers love nothing more than telling you what they know and how they did things. And that's great because, other programmers benefit from that. This is how young programmers become better, older, talented programmers, as they learn from us. So if we're not out there, putting these public artifacts on the internet for people to follow and look at and learn from, then you're not really advancing the craft of programming, right? I mean, how many people can you mentor on a one-to-one basis? Probably not many. But through the internet, you could mentor programmers all over the world. These, little nuggets of information you're leaving on Stack Overflow. So we want to extend that model to, as many topics as it fits. We realize that Q&A may or may not fit for some topics, so we don't have to own the world in that sense. I'm not going to force a fit. And in fact, this process that's described on the Stack Exchange blog, we're actually going to shut down the site. If they don't reach a certain size or a certain critical mass, we're going to actually, rather than have all these ghost towns of just, not enough information, we're actually going to shut the site down, archive the information so anybody can get to it. Because everything we do is Creative Commons, so it's always available. It's never destroyed. And then we'll just close down the site because we'd rather, a ghost town is a net negative for the internet because it draws, occasionally someone will get sucked in there. It's like, oh, look, there's a place where there's information, but it's really a ghost town. There's nobody there. There's nobody answering questions. It's just not really a functioning community. It's like driving through the bad part of town, We're not going to leave that up. So as part of our urban planning mission, we were just going to, raise the areas of the town that aren't working and rebuild them as something else. Mm-hmm. So we're not shy about turning things off if it's not working either.
What about turning things on? What about adding things? I mean, you're saying you're using words like mentorship and learning, but the site's primarily focused around targeted answers to targeted questions.
Well, but how do you learn? I mean, you look at the Socratic method, right? Is like to ask questions, of your teacher. And I think Q&A is an outstanding format for learning. I've had so many people tell me on Stack Overflow that they learned Ruby from just answering questions on Stack Overflow. This actually never even occurred to me. But I was at the Dev Days in LA and this guy came up to me, and I've had a number of people since then tell me, how they've actively learned new topics in this format, which surprised me a little bit because I think you can learn. My view was, of course, you're learning, but I viewed it as learning within your existing discipline. I learned something new about, C#, which is what I use. But they were actually learning completely unrelated programming languages by trying to answer these people's questions and figuring out what it took to answer these questions.
So you're saying like newbies answering other newbies' questions about languages they don't speak?
Pretty much. I know it's surprising, right? But I think, it actually worked that way. I never predicted that particular use.
Wow. That is interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So the way you asked a question about how these sites will get formed. So we're getting a lot of inspiration from Usenet, not entirely, but one of the top lines is maybe we're trying to be Usenet 2.0 on a smaller scale than Usenet. And the way topics are going to get formed is there's this other site you'll go to. We haven't come up with a really good name for this yet, but let's call it New Sites. So you'll go to the New Sites site and you'll propose there should be a Stack Overflow like site on, dogs. So you'd say, I'm proposing we have a Stack Overflow on dogs. So you have to come up with a paragraph describing what it is. Okay, it's a site for dogs. You'll talk about dog breeding. You'll talk about dog grooming, anything about dogs. And then you have to come up with 5 representative questions that will be on topic for this site, and 5 questions that will be off topic for this site. And I mean off topic in a subtle way, not, aren't cats awesome? or why is the sky blue? It's got to be some subtle thing that's about dogs, but it's not really about dogs enough to be on topic. Because what we found is one of the biggest challenges for a community is you have to define the boundaries of that community. It's like, what do we love and what do we hate? So to me, that's what defines a community. You love the same things and you hate the same things. So for programmers, it's that we love code, and it doesn't really matter what language it is. I think that's a false assumption a lot of people made about programmers, like, oh, there should be a C# site because the .NET guys hate the Java guys. And on Stack Overflow, we realized that's not really true. Good programmers know more than one language, and they don't hate people that use a different language because that's stupid, right? Because our shared goal is like, let's write awesome code that does cool stuff. That's what we love. And the thing that we hate as programmers is bad code. Code that just makes you cry, that you have to maintain. This guy had no idea what he's doing. He wrote this terrible code that makes your life miserable. That's what you want to get rid of, right? And that's where the learning vector comes in. Ideally, you want to teach these bad programmers, the ones that can be reached, you want to teach them how to do it better so they're not creating all this bad code that someone has to clean up. So with programmers, we know what they love and we know what they hate because, I'm a programmer, you're a programmer. This is easy, right? Now, for topics that like dogs, it's like, okay, what do dog lovers love, and what do they hate? And I think the what do they hate part gets difficult because I think dog, you have to define it. And if you don't define the boundaries of the community, then the community kind of falls apart because it's either too general, in which case these people have nothing really in common, or there's people who don't like each other on the same site or have like totally radically different interests. Like one thing that came up when we were at Fog Creek, we were in New York for a week trying to figure out what it is we're doing. I was talking to Michael Pryor, who is Joel's business partner, and he's a big aquarium guy. He's a big aquarium hobbyist. And he was mentioning to me that there should be an aquarium site, perhaps. That's something we could put together. And when I was talking to Michael, I was like, oh yeah, cool. Everybody who loves aquariums could be on the site. And he said, no. He's like, no, not the freshwater people. The freshwater people can't be on our site. Because apparently in aquariums, there's freshwater and saltwater. And saltwater is like way harder. That's like science and like, it's just, I don't know anything about aquariums, but from what he was telling me, it's just this whole different world. And they, I don't want to say despise is not the right word, but they have no respect for the freshwater aquarium people because Michael said, yeah, with the freshwater, you just throw some water in a bucket and you throw some fish in and you're done. It's really, there's nothing to it. It's silly, So you could make the case that if you start an aquarium site, I didn't know that. But this is something we want to figure out as part of this process. Is when you start this aquarium site, the off-topic questions would be, oh, this is a freshwater aquarium question. This doesn't belong here because this is a site for people who love saltwater aquariums.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff
hilarious.
You have to figure out in advance. Yeah, and we didn't really do a good job of that we did an okay job on Stack Overflow, but when we moved into Server Fault and Super User, I don't think we did a very good job of deciding ahead of time, which questions would be, how do we map the boundaries of this and having concrete examples of specific questions that people ask that are either on or off topic for the site. So that's step one, is to come up with this proposal with the 10 questions, 5 on, 5 off, and the topic. And then people will sort of vote on those and say, which ones do you like? Those will get sorted, of course, like on Stack Overflow and go to the top. And then there's a phase 2 where you actually commit to the sites. You can only commit to one site per cycle. And you have to have a reputation within the Stack Overflow system to do some of this. But we will allow people from just random internet people to contribute to this as well. There's this weighting system. So if you're, say, Jon Skeet, who happens to be the number one user on Stack Overflow, your contribution, when you say, I commit to the site, that carries a lot of weight. Because we know a couple things about you. We know, A, you're an experienced user. You have lots of reputation. B, you have a track record of producing really, really good content that other people voted up. And probably just, longevity. You've been around a while. So your vote will carry more weight. But, random anonymous internet users can vote as well. Their vote will be like a fraction of Jon Skeet's. But if there's enough of them, there's a little meter. It's a YMCA when they're doing those fund drives. They have a thermometer. It's like, oh, we're raising money. 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. There's a giant thermometer for each one of these sites. And as people commit to them, and remember, you can only commit to one site per cycle. So you can't commit to 5 or 6 things because we think that's ridiculous. It's like, are you really going to go to 6 different sites?
Okay.
Hey, it's alternate universe Scott Hanselman. Going to thank our sponsors for making this free show possible. We've been doing Hansel Minutes for almost 4 years now, and we really couldn't do it without Telerik. So I want to tell you about some of the stuff they're working on. If you've already started developing with Silverlight, then you probably need a solid testing tool to do your Silverlight UIs. Unfortunately, though, a lot of the tools available today only help you with unit testing. There's not really a good way to simulate the actual behavior of those end users, unless you spend days and weeks doing a lot of manual testing. But the guys at Telerik have got a new point-and-click UI testing tool for Silverlight called Web UI Test Studio. And the beauty is that you can quickly record your tests with a cross-browser recorder. You can enrich them with code if you've got really complex scenarios. And on top of that, it supports all the standard controls as well as the Telerik enhanced controls. You can verify not only Silverlight, but even complex AJAX applications. Best part, Web UI Test Studio lives in Visual Studio, so you don't have to leave your favorite development environment. You can check it out at telerik.com/web-testing-tools. And be sure to thank Telerik for supporting the show on their Facebook fan page at facebook.com/Telerik.
I mean, it may be that Jon Skeet is really into, let's go back to our aquariums example. Maybe Jon Skeet is really into saltwater aquariums. I didn't know that. I mean, programmers have a lot of really cool interests. I mean, we're just talking about smart people who do interesting stuff. Mm-hmm. So he might have that interest. So he would commit to that in the cycle. And then as the thermometer fills up, eventually you reach a threshold. And those are the sites that actually go into beta. And, you know, how we have a beta site. There's a private beta, people seed it, and then there's a public beta. It's very much like the process we did when we launched Server Fault and Superuser. We had this process, but it was a very ad hoc process that we just came up with. It's like, oh, we should have a beta. We should have a private beta. We should have a public beta. We should come up with a logo. We should come up with a name. All this stuff that we were doing in an ad hoc way is going to be documented and sort of, I don't want to say formalized because that makes it sound complicated, but it will walk you through the process of doing this. And it's the community deciding, you know, rather than us sitting in a room saying, what should we have new sites on? The community can actually decide what new sites there need to be. And then over time, my hope is, I talked about the technical ghetto that I feel like we're sometimes in. As we take baby steps, okay, so we start with Stack Overflow. You have a programmer that loves aquariums. So that programmer would vote for the saltwater aquarium site and participate on it. Hopefully it would, you know, do well and succeed. And then in the next cycle, somebody on the aquarium site, maybe they're not even a programmer. Maybe they found us through, you know, an internet search and like, oh, wow, this is a great site for saltwater aquarium enthusiasts like myself. That person would have another shared interest. Let's say, you know, dogs. That's a simple one. And then that person, not even being a programmer, would then vote for launching a dog site. I mean, that's the hope, is that we're going to take these baby steps outside the technical ghetto and actually eventually maybe bring in people that, you know, aren't technical at all, but are willing to participate in this sort of democratic process of how should we launch these sites? If you like this format and you think it works well, what other topics would you like there to be and that you would actively participate in? The old Stack Exchange model was, you know, pay us $129 a month and you can launch a site on any topic. But what we found was that, and I guess I've always known this, is that money is like not really a good glue for sticking people together. The glue that sticks people together is shared love of a topic. And
money.
Yeah, and they weren't really poised for success.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. They weren't really poised for success. Joel has a nice little Venn diagram on the blog entry on blog.stackexchange.com that documents this. Like, okay, you have the intersection of people who have $129 a month, who have the ability to bring in an audience, and there's like two other things, and the success is like this tiny little sliver of a Venn diagram, right? So our hope is to widen that Venn diagram to make it so that communities can actually be successful, because we'll be supporting you. We'll be helping you drive traffic to the sites. We'll provide experienced users that are interested in the topic. And the goal isn't to make money, because that's just a tough goal to get people behind, because, I mean, that's not really my goal. You know, it's like, it's shared love of the topic, and that, you know, we're producing better information on this topic for the entire internet to benefit from. And we learn from it. You know, to me, what motivates me is that I get excited about it. I just love to learn about a topic. Like, I love to learn, and I love to share information about that topic with other people in a way that, you know, you have this nice virtuous cycle going. You know, I help you, you help me, and we're both learning, and that's awesome. It's like every day I learn more stuff. And I think those are the type of people we want to attract. People that are really interested in sharing their knowledge about the topic and learning from others about it. And that's the loop that we want to close. And, although we are a for-profit company, I've been basically just saying, it's like, I want to run very, very similarly to a nonprofit in the sense that we want to be very clear that, we have to have money to run as a business, but the top line goal is to make the internet better and to provide better places to get information about these things that you love and to share it. So, it's a little bit of a religious mission for me, but I feel like, that's what I've seen work on the internet. And those are the communities that I love, and that's the kind of thing that I want to be a part of. So, we'll see where it goes, but that's the current plan.
Let me ask you this. There are the information dense homepage of Stack Overflow and the kind of like intense focus on the minutia of statistics is attractive for a nerd, but for someone doing like cross stitching, that might be pretty scary. And they might jump on the site and go, where, what weird corner of the internet have I come upon? Well, forum sites and kind of PHBB, there might be an existing cross-stitching or a saltwater aquarium site, but it also has got a nice skin on it that's more than just changing the color and adding a logo. There may be a huge community that wants a Stack Overflow like Q&A site, but they would like it to look like their site. Is that possible, or will Stack Overflow always look like kind of a car dashboard?
Well, I think you have to quantify. There's really a couple key pages on Stack Overflow. It's kind of depressing from a coding perspective because we spent all this time working on it. You realize on Stack Overflow there's basically 5 pages on the entire site, but 5 really awesome pages, right? There's the user page that describes who a user is, what questions they have, all that stuff. So you have your user page, the home page, big, and then question pages. So really, actually, there's more actually, but those 3 are pretty much the backbone of the site. So I don't think the question page itself is that intimidating. So when people talk about this, and I agree that the homepage is very dense, but by design, the question page is not that intimidating. That's where most people will end up because Google's not going to send you to the homepage, or whatever web search engine you use. It's not going to send you to the homepage. It's going to send you to some page that has the answer to some question that you typed into a search box on a web search page.
If you're looking for a question, yes.
Yeah, I don't think that page is really that intimidating. So I think it's a little bit of an unfair comparison. Now, the homepage, I'll admit, is very dense. But the goal of the homepage, it's almost like Wikipedia, where how many people do you know that actually edit a Wikipedia page? We make a lot of noise about how great it is that Wikipedia is a shared thing, and
I don't know. They never come outside.
The actual editing of a Wikipedia page is very, very intimidating, extremely so.
Sure.
It kind of freaks me out, and I'm a programmer, right? I was like, well, how do I do this? And where, I click edit, and then I have this incredibly complicated process.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think our homepage is that. It's okay for the homepage to be a bit of a barrier. So when you come on the homepage, you should be inundated with information about, okay, this is what this is about. Here's a bunch of questions. Here's the topics, which is the tags. The homepage has really, you're not supposed to understand it. The only thing the homepage is supposed to do is say, wow, this is a place where there's a lot of X. And if X is something that you're like, wow, I really love X, then that's good, right? You should be hanging out there and you should click through it. Wow, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. I wonder if anybody has answered this. And I don't think it's actually that much more dense than the average bulletin board page. The average bulletin board page is actually quite dense with a lot of really incidental information. So all that said, we are open to CSS skinning of the sites. Every site that we launch should have a somewhat unique look, not entirely. There's Joel, this is maybe not the best analogy in the world, but the dummies books, those have a certain look. Anytime you go to a bookstore, it's like, oh, that's a dummies book, right? Because it has that yellow thing and it's got that guy with the chalkboard or whatever. Mm-hmm. We do want to have some recognizability to the brand so people can recognize, okay, you're a screwdriver. You look like a screwdriver. So we're not going to switch it up so radically that people can't tell, oh, this is a Stack Overflow family site. But doing stuff like turning off the views column, feel like, okay, there's too much numbers on this page for this one site. I don't want the views column to be visible. There are Stack Exchange sites that have already done this. So, and we have 2 designers now going through doing a CSS Zen Garden type of exercise with us, where they're producing 5 CSS skins each that we can then use as a palette for launching new sites. Like, okay, we have these 10 CSS designs, or you can create your own, So we do want to give people a menu of sorts so they can make the site look kind of like what they want. But we do want to have a consistent theme within the network of like, okay, it's recognizably a Stack site, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are really the two goals.
I have two questions then. One, I'm thinking of my dad as being kind of a surprisingly typical internet user, in that I went over to his house and set up his browser and basically put in like a bookmark bar, and I put in like the 5 sites that he visits. So while for one level of internet user, Google or a search engine is their on-ramp to the internet, I'm realizing that a surprisingly massive number of people don't use Google that much. They've used it before. They've picked their sites, and now they have their sites. And their on-ramp to the internet is a favorites bar, or a bookmark bar, or some links somewhere. My dad visits 5 websites. Sadly, one of them is mine. But he does traditional bow hunting and archery, like the way the Native Americans did it. So he has 3
cool.
websites he visits that are like, go out into the woods, find a tree, cut the tree up, and come out with a bow and arrow. And it takes 7 weeks and a bunch of lacquer, and it's an incredibly complicated thing. It's a lot like saltwater aquariums. And I think that would be
that's cool.
It would be ideal for what you're doing. But knowing these guys, and these are like mustache people. And you know what I mean by that? Like, you're in America, your generation is defined by, the thickness and quality of your mustache, and these gentlemen all look like Magnum PI. You know what I'm saying? If you decide to rock a stash that's that thick and wonderful, you're either a Civil War reenactor or you're like in your 60s. So
no, I totally get it.
Okay, good. So these are those guys. Those guys could not absorb, just because it's generational. I'm not saying they're old or smart or not smart or what. They're just different people. They could never absorb, I think, the amount of information you have on the homepage of Stack Overflow. So it would be interesting to see, to optimize what a Stack Overflow site would look like for the folks like that. And then my second kind of half question related is, a lot of time they're just kind of just chatting. They're just talking. Where would just talking? I mean, is every discussion started by a question? I guess is my meta question there.
Yeah. So I think, let me answer your 2-part questions. So I think it's our hope that we eventually get out of the engineering ghetto. Although we love engineers, it's great. Eventually we want to take enough baby steps that we actually get to, I'm going to make my own bow enthusiast site. That's awesome, because our goal is really to support communities like that. As long as there's enough people to reach a little mini critical mass, and it doesn't have to be thousands of people. It could be a few hundred that really love it. That's fine. I don't think you would spend a ton of time on the homepage. Generally you're drilling through pretty rapidly to the questions. The question pages are the meat of the site. The front page is just, it's trying to show you a veneer of okay, this is the boundaries of the topics that we're talking about. So you can get a sense of, am I in the right place? Am I in a biker bar, where everybody's looking at me like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And if I'm not a biker, that's the way they should be looking at me, right? So that's actually kind of okay. It's actually okay for it to be a little intimidating, because you want the right people to stay. The people that love, hand building these bows, spending weeks lacquering it, that's your people, right? Those are the people that you want to not be intimidated. It's like, I've spent weeks building a bow. This doesn't intimidate me in the slightest. When you see a question that says, how many months should I be working on my, should the lacquer heal on my bow? That would scare away a normal person, and that's good.
Right.
So that's my part answer to that. It's meant to be a tiny bit intimidating until you drill through the question page. And then as for the second part of your question, which I think I've already forgotten, can you refresh my memory?
Sometimes people just want to talk. And these guys will just talk.
Sorry.
And an example of talking would be thinking about all these hobbies, right? There's a million hobbyists out there that have a million hobbies. And sometimes they just want to post pictures of them. So it's like, hey, here's this bow I've been working on. Here's the story about how I made it. What do you think? And then people will talk. And on Stack Overflow, if I posted a question and said, here's this program I've been working on, here's the code, what do you think? I'd be immediately, shot, and they would tell me that I was off topic.
right? So there's definitely a tension there, and it's definitely a by design thing that we discourage sort of arbitrary discussion, because Robert Scoble had a really good post where he documented exactly why this is, because if there's too much, you want some discussion but not too much, because if there's too much discussion, you're not really learning anymore. You're just a couple guys hanging out, shooting the breeze, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if your goal is like, look, I want to get really good at building these bows, that's my number one goal, is to like build my bow, then that kind of starts harming the mission at some point. And I think that's one of the big problems with existing discussion boards, is they make it so easy to fall into that trap of like, you know, a couple people just shooting the breeze. And the information, the signal to noise ratio goes in the wrong direction, like a lot, like very, very far in the wrong direction. So we unapologetically optimize for information, where we say, look, unless it's a question about the topic that can have a reasonable answer, then we don't think you should ask it. Now, this is definitely frustrating for certain people, because and certainly on Stack Overflow and even SuperUser and ServerFault, we've formed some really nice communities of smart people that know a lot of stuff, and they're actually really interesting people to talk to. I mean, they're brilliant, some of them. And I think any community is going to have that. So, I think maybe the answer is, and we haven't fully mapped the topography of this world yet, is that you actually have some sort of back room. We have a meta site on Stack Overflow, but even that has to be on topic about, okay, you're talking about the website itself. You're not two guys hanging out talking about each other, or what where your kids are going to college or whatever. But there actually maybe even needs to be a third place. So you would have, say, let's pick ServerFault, which is about system administrators. So you would have ServerFault, you would have Meta ServerFault, which we kind of don't have. We have a aggregated one at the moment, but it would be meta about just that site. And then actually even a third site, which would be like offtopic.serverfault.com. And you would actually go there if you just wanted to talk about, whatever with these people that you've grown to like. But I feel so many of these forum engines optimize for discussion to the detriment of information, that I think it's okay for us to be a little bit on the extreme side of like, we're optimizing for information. We're making it really hard to have discussion, because I think people follow the scent of information, because I think ultimately that's what people want. Although discussion is great, there's nothing wrong with it. In terms of adding value to the world, information is what does it. Quality breadcrumb trails of really good information that, there's no other place in the world that can tell you exactly, how to build a bow in the way that these guys do. And there's a whole community of people, pumping out the really fantastic, brilliant information on how they're doing this, and we're unlocking that world. And the people that are attracted to the scent of that information will ultimately build a stronger community, even though there's not, technically hangout places and discussion stuff. You eventually will have this supernova of information, because that is the thing that comes to the top in our system. And we think it does that really, really well, better than almost any other system. So for those type of people that are attracted to information, I think it's irresistible. Now, for the people that are less into the information and more into the hangout, there might be other places you would want to go. There can be more than one community on this topic. Ours is going to be very information centric. So I think you have to sort of figure out like where you are on that axis. Are you mostly about the information and a little bit about the hanging out? Are you totally about the hanging out and only, I just build these bows because I like hanging out with these guys, I
hear what you're saying, but, and I hear the passion in your voice, so I'll just give you some, like, my opinion and stuff. So take it and throw it away. But I think that if you want to take over the internet in a larger sense, you've gotta, you're talking too much like a programmer. You're talking too much like, yes, information is king, blah, 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 Scoble, blah, 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 TechCrunch. But there are some people who want, the community is just the collaboration, and the questions are secondary. And I think that if you want to get the Needlepoint ladies and the bow hunting mustache people, you got to realize that they may want to just chat about stuff. And I think that you're so close, you're like 85% there. You could have a chat about stuff interface for Stack Overflow. Like, let's say that you had another Jon Skeet, right? A bow and arrow using mustache Jon Skeet, except he provides not answers and brilliance, but just a sense of community. He's just the chattiest, most friendly, slap you on the back, here's a beer guy. He should get points and reputation for that too, because he makes people feel good about the community. But that person doesn't exist from a score perspective in a Stack Overflow instance. But he would be a great person to do needlepoint and bow and arrows with.
Well, we were in a meeting this week with Anil Dash as part of this New York City Think Week thing that we did, and he actually made an interesting observation, which I do agree with, that the engine may only work for communities where there's this core of information, where that's the thing that we sort of suck out. It's like, okay, we suck out all the information, and then the people that were not really about the information, there's like, okay, you know, they may need another place to go. You may be segregating the audiences at that point. I'm not against adding things to the engine. I'm always open to adding things that make sense. And part of the reason we're doing this is as we grow these communities and have these different communities, we want the engine to evolve and become better. So I'm totally open to you know, changing it to make it more adaptable to these communities, as long as we're satisfying the core mission of like filling the internet with really good information and some discussion. You know, I mean, it's okay to have fun. Like I had to write a whole blog post on the Stack Overflow blog about like, look, it's okay to occasionally have fun questions. We're not all business. We're not like, you can never ask anything fun or you will be crushed by the boot heel of, you know, the moderation system on Stack Overflow. That is not really the case. But what you have to understand is that if it's too much fun, it becomes no longer about the information. It's like, oh wow, this is fun. We're on a carnival fun ride.
Well, no, I'm not saying
right?
fun like, you know, woohoo, look at this funny video and hey, keyboard cat, play them off. I'm just talking about community in the kind of huggy, kissy kind of way, and not in the
yes
talking about answers.
Well, I think you're right, and I think my point is that there's a certain percentage of it. There's a certain balance ratio that's good for that, and when we calibrate our little, you know, communityometers, we're sliding these sliders over to certain positions, and it's heavy on the information side, but we do allow some fun, and that's intentional, and I think we do allow some discussion, because, I mean, you have to have some discussion to even understand the question that's being asked, right? There's a certain amount that you just have to even get things done on the system. So I am open to adjusting these sliders. What I'm not open to, though, probably, is like when people say, hey, you've built a truck. That's great. The truck is great, but I really want a sports car. You know, so I think we have to, as we grow, we got to figure out, okay, do you really want a sports car? If you really want a sports car, you should buy a sports car. You know, I mean, there's certain things we can never fully adapt to. But, you know, if you're in a truck, you got to carry 6 people, then they just get in the bed of the truck, right? It's not super comfortable. But, hey, they're getting to their destination in the truck. It's not optimal. But at the point where you're saying, hey, this is, you know, we're always riding in the back of your truck, let's close it up and turn it into a bus, then, you know, you got to be careful. I mean, it's just a balancing act. But I am very, very open to tweaking these little sliders a little bit in each direction, depending on the tone of the community. As long as it doesn't sacrifice our core mission of, you know, you got to love the information first. I mean, if you want to just hang out with people, you should really be on Facebook. And I think Facebook is going to eventually dominate the internet in that way. For those communities that you're talking about, I can't see any future other than the dystopian everybody is on Facebook solution for those guys. Because for them, it's about the social graph. It's about hanging out and stuff. And, you know, some amount of that we do want, but it's information first, relationships second. And whereas Facebook is relationships first, information third. So
all right.
It's a question of where you balance that.
Well, Jeff Atwood, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about Stack Overflow. Well, at least this short week will replace the Stack Overflow podcast.
That's right, we will. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks so much. All right, this has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and I'll see you again next week.